house isn't yours anymore," Bianca said, her voice smooth and sharp as glass. "Now that Arthur's gone, it's time you moved out." The words struck like a slap. Eleanor's heart froze, spoon halfway to her lips. The lamb stew had gone cold, the candlelight flickering weakly against the window. Across the table, her son Lucas stared into his wine, pretending not to hear. His wife, Bianca, leaned back with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Arthur's chair stood empty at the head of the table, the same place he'd sat every night for 33 years. Even now, Eleanor could almost hear his voice, low and steady, saying grace. "Excuse me?" she whispered. Bianca's tone turned falsely gentle. "You're almost 70, Eleanor. This house is too much for one person. The roof, the bills, the garden, it's all a burden. There's a lovely senior community in Hataitai. You'd fit right in." Eleanor looked at Lucas, her only child. "Lucas, do you agree with this?" He hesitated, then sighed. "She's right, Mom. It's too big for you alone. The insurance, the maintenance, it's expensive." Eleanor felt her chest tighten. "Expensive? Your father and I built this place with our hands. Every beam, every wall, every corner, our life is here." Bianca shrugged. "Memories don't pay property taxes." A week ago, Eleanor had buried her husband. Now she was being evicted from her home by her own family. She laid her napkin down carefully. "How long do I have before you bring in the movers?" 2 weeks should be enough," Bianca replied, smiling. "We'll help you pack." Eleanor laughed softly, a hollow sound. 2 weeks. After 33 years, that's generous. "Mom," Lucas said, his voice low, "don't make this harder than it needs to be. We just want what's best for you." "For me," she repeated, standing slowly. "Don't pretend this is about me." Bianca's gaze sharpened. "We're being practical. This isn't about emotions." "Practical," Eleanor said. "That's what Arthur used to call things he couldn't explain, like love." She turned from the table. "Enjoy your practicality." Her chair screeched across the hardwood as she walked out. Lucas muttered her name but didn't follow. In the hall, Eleanor passed the family portrait, the three of them smiling under a bright Wellington sky. Lucas had been 15 then, braces flashing, his arm looped through his father's. Arthur had that same proud, easy smile she'd fallen in love with. Now, in the dim light, Eleanor saw her reflection over their faces, older, worn, but still standing. Upstairs, the bedroom smelled faintly of Arthur's cologne. His jacket hung on the chair by the window, his glasses still on the nightstand. She pressed the fabric to her face, breathing in the fading scent. "You'd laugh at this, wouldn't you?" she whispered. "You'd tell me to stay calm and read the fine print." Arthur had always managed the money, bank accounts, contracts, property taxes. She'd trusted him completely. Once, he'd said lightly, "If anything happens to me, just talk to Rosa Delgado at Kari Bank. She'll take care of you." At the time, Eleanor hadn't thought much of it. Now, the memory burned bright. Downstairs, she could still hear Bianca's voice, brisk and confident, already talking about renovations. Lucas's replies were faint, uncertain. His silence at dinner had said everything. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. The skin was thin, the veins blue and raised, but her fingers were steady now. Arthur used to tease her about her stubborn streak. "You never back down," he'd say, half admiring, half exasperated. He'd been right. Tomorrow she would go to the bank. Outside, the wind pushed hard against the windows. The sea beyond shimmered under the moonlight, restless and cold. Eleanor watched it roll toward the shore again and again, relentless, unstoppable. Bianca thought she'd won tonight. Lucas thought compliance was safety. They had both forgotten something Arthur never did. Eleanor Hart had learned from the sea she loved so much. It could appear calm and harmless, but beneath the surface, it carried power enough to change the shore. She turned off the lamp and lay back, listening to the storm building outside. Her heart still ached, but the ache felt different now, tighter, sharper, focused. They could measure rooms and call contractors if they wished. They could draw up plans for a house they didn't yet own. Tomorrow she would begin hers. 7 days ago she'd buried her husband. In 14 her son expected her gone. But in the quiet darkness, Eleanor almost smiled. Arthur had always said she was stronger than she knew. And soon, very soon, everyone else would know it too. The house felt colder the next morning, as if grief had settled into the walls. Eleanor moved through the quiet rooms, her slippers whispering over the floors Arthur once polished. Family photos lined the hallway. Arthur's grin, Lucas's bright eyes, faces from a world that no longer existed. In the kitchen, she brewed coffee the way Arthur liked it. 2 even scoops, 1 pinch of salt. The scent filled the air, but it couldn't silence Bianca's words from the night before. This house isn't yours anymore. Outside, the Wellington wind rattled the glass. The roses Arthur planted drooped, petals scattered across damp soil. The life they built together was falling apart. Eleanor sat at the table, hands around her mug. Lucas's voice echoed softly in her mind. "It's for your own good." Those words had always been Arthur's too, when he handled the bills, when he told her not to worry about money. Back then they'd sounded loving. Now they sounded like warning. By mid-morning, she knew what she had to do. She put on her navy coat, tied a scarf, and left without telling anyone. Her old silver sedan started with a reluctant cough, the engine trembling like her pulse. The drive to Kari Bank took 15 minutes along the harbor road. The sea tossed white foam against the rocks, gray lights spilling over the water. Wellington never hid its storms. It faced them. The bank's glass doors reflected her face, lined, pale, but determined. Inside, a woman greeted her with a gentle smile. "Mrs. Hart, I'm Rosa Delgado. I'm so sorry about Arthur. He was one of the good ones." Eleanor nodded. "He trusted you." They sat in Rosa's small office overlooking the bay. Eleanor clutched her handbag. Arthur handled everything, our accounts, the house, the business. "I need to know what's left. I don't even know where to begin." Rosa typed quickly, scanning the screen. "You're listed on several accounts, checking, savings, and..." She paused, raising her brows. "A trust. The Hart family trust." Eleanor blinked. "A trust? Arthur never mentioned that." "It was created 5 years ago," Rosa explained. "You're the sole beneficiary. It's been receiving monthly deposits from Hart Coastal Builders." Eleanor frowned. "That company was sold when he retired." Rosa shook her head. "Not sold, restructured. He stayed as trustee." "The trust is healthy, Mrs. Hart. Very healthy. You're not just stable, you're secure." Eleanor's breath caught as Rosa printed the statements. The numbers glowed in clean black ink, far more than she'd ever imagined. "He never told me," she whispered. Rosa smiled kindly. "It's common. Husbands sometimes create hidden trusts to protect their wives, especially when they sense family conflict or inheritance tension." Eleanor gave a small, bitter laugh. "Family conflict. That's one word for it." Rosa's tone softened. "He planned carefully. Everything is legal, and it's all under your control." Eleanor touched her name on the page. Arthur had seen this coming, Lucas's weakness, Bianca's ambition. He'd built her a fortress disguised as paperwork. "When Arthur said you'd take care of me," she murmured, "he meant this." Rosa nodded. "He wanted you safe." Eleanor folded the documents into her bag. Thank you, Rosa. You've given me something I thought I'd lost, hope. Outside, the harbor wind hit her face, sharp but clean. She stood a moment beneath the gray sky, the papers rustling softly in her purse. The Hart Family Trust. Sole beneficiary, Eleanor Hart. Relief filled her chest, then hardened into resolve. Bianca's smirk from dinner flashed before her, her talk of senior living and practical choices. Lucas's silence. They thought she was helpless. They thought she'd surrender. But Arthur had known better. Let them measure rooms, call realtors, plan their new life. They were building their future on her foundation. She drove home along the coast, the tide rising under pale sunlight. The sea reminded her of Arthur, steady, calm, powerful beneath the surface. At the gate, she paused. The house no longer looked like a burden. It looked like a battlefield, and she had just found her weapon. That night, she sat at the dining table, the same place where they'd dismissed her, and spread the bank papers across the polished wood. The numbers glimmered under the lamplight like quiet justice. Tomorrow, she would contact the company's accountant. She wanted to see how deep Arthur's protection went. Bianca thought she'd defeated a grieving widow. Lucas thought obedience meant peace. They were both wrong. Eleanor looked toward the window, the sea beyond it. The wind rattled the panes, steady as breath. Arthur had left her more than memories. He'd left her strength disguised as numbers, love turned into power. And tomorrow, she would begin to use it. Eleanor woke before sunrise, the house silent except for the waves rolling against Wellington Harbor. She dressed quickly, her movement steady. Yesterday, the truth at Kari Bank had changed everything. Arthur had left her protection disguised as paperwork. Today, she needed to know how deep it went. By 8, she sat in the quiet office of Morrison and Patel Accounting. The receptionist smiled. "Mrs. Hart, Mr. Patel is expecting you." James Patel, a man in his 50s with calm eyes and silver hair, rose to greet her. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry for your loss. Arthur admired you greatly." "Thank you," she said, taking a seat. "Rosa Delgado told me about the Hart Family Trust. Money still coming from Hart Coastal Builders. I thought that company was gone." James folded his hands. "Not gone. Restructured. Arthur placed all assets under your trust 5 years ago. Officially, he retired, but he still managed the company quietly. It's been operating under Diego Alvarez." Eleanor's brow furrowed. "Diego?" Arthur trusted him. "He still does," James said. "The business is small but stable, steady contracts, loyal clients. You're now the legal owner through the trust." Eleanor stared at him. "Arthur never told me. He didn't want you burdened with details, but he prepared everything for your security." He opened a file and slid it across the desk. "There's another matter, your son. Over the last 5 years, Lucas borrowed nearly $90,000. Every loan documented by Arthur, none repaid." Eleanor's breath caught. "He told me they were gifts." James shook his head. Arthur believed in fairness. He separated family from finance. The contracts are clear. She looked at the pages, Arthur's handwriting steady, careful. His foresight felt like a whisper from the grave. "He knew this would happen," she said softly. "Yes," James replied. "He wanted you protected, even from those closest to you." Eleanor straightened. "So, the business, the trust, it's mine to control?" He nodded. "All yours, Mrs. Hart." She rose, clutching the documents. Arthur used to say he built things to last. "I never realized I was one of them." James smiled faintly. "He'd be proud of you." Outside, the air was sharp with sea salt. For the first time in weeks, she felt steady. She drove toward the old construction yard, following the coastal road Arthur had taken every morning. The gate stood open. Diego Alvarez looked up from a clipboard, surprise flickering across his face. "Mrs. Hart." I wasn't expecting you. I wanted to see what Arthur left behind, she said. He nodded respectfully. Everything's still running. Smaller jobs, reliable clients, just like he liked it. Eleanor glanced around, the workers, the hum of machines, the smell of sawdust and oil. The place was alive, breathing proof of Arthur's diligence. "You've done well, Diego," she said. "Thank you, ma'am." He hesitated. "Lucas stopped by last week, said he was taking over, wanted access to the accounts. I refused." Eleanor's eyes hardened. "Good. Keep refusing. Nothing changes without my approval." Diego looked relieved. "Mr. Arthur warned me about that. Told me to follow your lead." Eleanor nodded. "Then we understand each other." They stood for a moment in silence. The wind carried the scent of pine and ocean. "Arthur trusted you," she said quietly. "Now I do too." Diego smiled faintly. "He always said you were stronger than you thought." Eleanor looked around once more, feeling Arthur's presence in every beam and brick. "He built this to protect me. Now it's my turn to protect it." When she left, the clouds began to lift, sunlight cutting through the gray. Driving home, she realized Arthur hadn't just left her security, he'd left her a foundation to rebuild her life. At home, she spread the files across his old desk. The wood was worn but solid. Arthur's handwriting stared up at her, patient, steady, loyal. Lucas and Bianca thought she was fragile, that her silence meant surrender. They were wrong. Arthur's plans had made her untouchable. Tomorrow she would decide how to deal with them. For now, she let the wind move through the curtains and whispered, "You really did see everything coming, didn't you?" Outside, the harbor glittered beneath the pale light. The sea, restless but constant, felt like Arthur himself, steady, guiding, watching. He hadn't left her alone. He'd left her ready. Eleanor smiled for the first time since the funeral. "I'm ready too," she whispered. "Let them try." The waves struck the rocks outside, powerful and rhythmic, as if agreeing with her. Eleanor stood outside her son's house, the morning sky heavy and still. She hadn't called first. Some truths didn't need appointments. Her heart was steady. No anger, only resolve. Lucas opened the door, startled. "Mom, you should have called." "I didn't think I had to," Eleanor said, stepping past him. "Where's Bianca?" "In the kitchen." Bianca's voice floated through the hall, smooth and practiced. Eleanor, what a surprise. She appeared, flawless as always, a polite smile hiding calculation. "Would you like coffee?" "No," Eleanor said, glancing around the pristine living room. "Nice place. Redecorating already?" Bianca tilted her head. "Just a few updates. We thought it might be time to modernize." "For my house?" Eleanor asked lightly. Bianca's smile froze. "You can't manage that property alone. It's for your own good." "There's a lovely senior community," Eleanor cut in. "And you'd sell the house? Handle the money?" "Of course," Bianca said smoothly. "You'd never have to worry again." Eleanor looked at Lucas. "And this is what you want too?" He hesitated. "It just makes sense, Mom." "Sense," Eleanor repeated. "That's what people say when they want something that isn't theirs." Bianca's tone hardened. "You're being dramatic. It's practical." "Practical," Eleanor echoed softly. "I remember that word from dinner, the night you told me to leave." Bianca folded her arms. "Someone has to make decisions." "Yes," Eleanor said, "and Arthur made his 5 years ago." Bianca frowned. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor opened her handbag, pulling out a folder. The Hart Family Trust. Arthur transferred everything into it. Our accounts, the company, the house. It's all in my name. Lucas's mouth fell open. "That can't be true." "It's true," Eleanor said calmly. "I confirmed it with Rosa Delgado at Cowrie Bank and Arthur's accountant. I own everything." Bianca blinked, disbelief flashing to anger. Arthur would never do that without telling us. He did it to protect me. From both of you. Lucas's face paled. Mom, that's unfair. No, she said firmly. Unfair is asking your grieving mother to pack her bags while you measure her walls. Bianca stepped closer. You think a few papers will stop us? Eleanor smiled thinly. Not papers, ownership. Legal, binding, and untouchable. Bianca's voice rose. You can't treat your family this way. You stopped being family when you tried to take what isn't yours. Lucas's voice cracked. Mom, please, can we not do this? Eleanor's tone softened but stayed firm. You made your choice when you stood by and said nothing. I'm done being quiet. Bianca's mask slipped. You'll regret this. Eleanor turned toward the door. No, Bianca, you will. She paused at the threshold. You'll be hearing from my attorney this week. Any attempt to sell, enter, or alter that property will be considered fraud. I suggest you choose your next steps carefully. Bianca's voice trembled with rage. You wouldn't dare. Eleanor looked her straight in the eye. Try me. The silence that followed was deep and sharp. Lucas sank into a chair, head in his hands. Bianca stood rigid, jaw clenched, eyes full of fury. Eleanor opened the door, letting in the cool breath of the harbor. Arthur saw this coming, she said quietly. He knew I'd have to stand alone someday. Turns out I'm quite good at it. Outside, the air was damp with salt and rain. She walked to her car, the folder pressed to her chest like a shield. Behind her, voices rose, Bianca's shrill, Lucas's helpless. But she didn't look back. The rain began to fall as she started the engine. Each drop struck the windshield like punctuation, firm and final. At home, she set the trust papers on Arthur's desk. The lamplight made the embossed seal gleam. She ran her fingers over his signature, steady, certain, protective. Lucas and Bianca thought she was powerless. They thought silence meant surrender. They were wrong. Arthur had built her a fortress out of foresight. Now it was hers to defend. She looked out the window toward the sea, where the waves beat endlessly against the rocks, strong and patient. You'd be proud, Arthur, she whispered. It's my turn now. The wind answered softly, rattling the glass, as if in approval. Eleanor smiled, calm and unafraid. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one she'd already survived. The storm had passed, leaving Wellington washed in pale sunlight and the scent of wet earth. Eleanor stood by the window with her morning coffee, watching waves crash against the rocks below. She'd barely slept, but it didn't matter. Her purpose was clear now. Lucas and Bianca knew part of the truth, but they didn't yet understand what Arthur had truly left her. She sat at Arthur's desk, opening the folders James Patel had given her. Every page carried her husband's careful handwriting, contracts, profits, notes in the margins. He had built her a fortress in plain sight. The phone rang. It was Diego Alvarez. Morning, Mrs. Hart. Just checking in. You asked for updates. Good morning, Diego, she said softly. How are things at the yard? Running well. The Morrison job's almost done. But your son came by again last night, asking for account access. Eleanor's voice hardened. And what did you tell him? I told him everything requires your approval, Diego said. He wasn't happy. I'm sure he wasn't, she replied. Thank you, Diego. You did exactly right. When she hung up, Eleanor sat in silence, the steady tick of the clock echoing through the room. Lucas was growing desperate, and Bianca's pride would only fuel him. They weren't done with her yet, but neither was she with them. By noon, she drove to the construction yard herself. The air smelled of sawdust and salt. Workers called greetings as she passed, and Diego waved her into the small office. Good to see you, ma'am, he said, spreading invoices on the table. "Everything's organized, but there's something you need to see." He handed her a printed email. From Lucas Hart. Subject, supply order. He had tried to purchase materials using the company's name. Eleanor read silently. "He's testing boundaries," she said. "That's what I figured," Diego replied. "I stopped the order immediately." "Good," she said. "Arthur trusted you, and so do I. Keep records of everything." Diego nodded. "He always said you were sharper than you let on." Eleanor smiled faintly. "He knew me better than anyone." They reviewed financials together. The company was thriving, consistent profits, no debt, loyal clients. Arthur's design ensured stability. As long as she allowed it, the business would fund her comfortably for years. Before leaving, she said, "If Lucas contacts you again, send him to me directly. Don't answer another question." "Understood," Diego said. "You can count on me." Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds. Eleanor paused, watching the reflection of the sky shimmer in a puddle on the gravel. Arthur had built this life with his hands. Now she would protect it with her will. When she returned home, an envelope sat on her doorstep. Inside, one short note in Lucas's hurried handwriting. "We need to talk. Please." She read it twice, expression unreadable. It could be guilt or manipulation. She folded it neatly and placed it beside the trust documents. The phone buzzed again. James Patel's voice came through, calm but alert. "Mrs. Hart, your son reached out to our office. He asked for access to the trust records. I assume you haven't authorized that?" "I have not," Eleanor said coldly. "That's what I thought." "Don't worry. Everything remains locked and documented." "Thank you, James. Keep a record of his request." After hanging up, she stood for a moment at the window, watching waves roll toward the shore. The water was calm now, but beneath the surface, it never stopped moving, just like her. Lucas's persistence didn't surprise her. He had Arthur's charm, but none of his discipline, and Bianca's pride would not allow retreat. They still thought she was the fragile woman who cried at the funeral. They were wrong. She turned back to Arthur's desk and ran her fingers across its worn surface. "You always said I underestimated myself," she murmured. "Not anymore." As evening settled, the house glowed warm under the lamplight. For the first time since Arthur's death, she felt peace, not the hollow quiet of grief, but the calm that comes after reclaiming control. Tomorrow she would decide whether to meet Lucas. He wanted a conversation. She wanted closure. The difference was that she now held every card. Outside, wind rattled the windows, but it no longer sounded threatening. It was simply the voice of the sea, steady, eternal, unafraid. Eleanor lifted her cup and whispered to the darkening sky, "I'm ready, Arthur. You taught me well." The wind seemed to answer, a low hum through the eaves, strong and sure. She smiled, a small, certain smile that reached her eyes. Whatever storm came next, she was no longer the woman who sought shelter. She was the one who built it. The morning light over Wellington was sharp and cold, the kind that revealed every flaw and shadow. Eleanor stood at her kitchen window, Lucas's note in her hand. "We need to talk. Please." She had read it 3 times, and each time it sounded less like regret and more like strategy. Still, Arthur would have told her to face things directly. By mid-morning, she dialed her son's number. "You wanted to talk," she said simply. Lucas hesitated. "Mom." "Yeah, thank you for calling. Can we meet? Just us?" "Fine, 1 o'clock. The cafe by the harbor." When she arrived, he was already there, fidgeting with his coffee cup. His shoulders sagged when he saw her. "You look well," he said. Eleanor sat opposite him. "Say what you came to say." He swallowed hard. "Bianca's furious. She says you blindsided us, that Dad never meant to cut us out." "I didn't blindside anyone." Eleanor replied. "Arthur made his choices long before he died. You just didn't bother to notice." "Mom, I'm sorry," Lucas said quickly. "I didn't know about the trust or the company. I never meant to hurt you." She watched him closely. His voice wavered between guilt and performance. "And now that you know about the trust, what is it you want?" "I just want to understand," he said softly. "You can't manage all this alone. Maybe I could help with the business." Her eyes narrowed. "You mean control it?" "That's not fair," he said, looking away. "It's honest," she replied. "You've always wanted what your father built without doing the work." He bristled. "That's not true, isn't it? You borrowed from him for years and never paid a cent back." Lucas's jaw tightened. He could afford it. "And now you think I can," she said. He sighed heavily. "Bianca thinks you're punishing us." "I'm protecting what your father left me," she said quietly. "Arthur built safeguards because he saw this coming. He knew love isn't enough when money's involved." Lucas leaned forward. "He didn't trust me. He never did." Eleanor's tone softened. "He trusted the part of you that used to be decent. The rest, he planned for." He rubbed his forehead. "You've changed." "Yes," she said. "I finally learned that kindness without limits turns into surrender." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the cafe filling the space between them. Then Lucas said, "Bianca wants to meet too. She thinks we can settle this without lawyers." Eleanor smiled faintly. Too late. The lawyers are already involved. His head jerked up. "You wouldn't do that." "I already have," she said calmly. "If either of you touches the trust or the business again, I'll press charges." He stared at her, disbelief flickering into anger. "You'd take your own son to court?" "I'd protect what Arthur built," she said. "That's my responsibility now." Lucas pushed back from the table. "You're not the woman I remember." "No," she said softly. "The woman you remember was too forgiving." He stood, shaking his head. "Bianca said this would happen. You want to fight." "I don't," she said, rising too, "but I'm prepared for one." He muttered something under his breath and walked out. Eleanor didn't follow. She sat for a moment, watching gulls dip across the harbor. The wind off the water smelled of salt and freedom. Back home, she found comfort in routine, washing a dish, straightening a frame, small acts that steadied her mind. When her phone rang, she half expected Lucas, but it was Diego. "Mrs. Hart," he said. Lucas came by again, wanted access to project files. "I told him no." "You did the right thing," she said. "If he shows up again, call the police." There was a pause. "I will, ma'am. But you should know, he's angry, not just upset, the kind of angry that makes bad decisions." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why Arthur planned ahead." After she hung up, she sat by the window. The late afternoon sun shimmered on the sea, golden and steady. She thought of Arthur's voice, low and reassuring. "Don't fight the tide, Ellie. Just learn how to move with it." She whispered, "I'm moving, Arthur." Finally. The house felt different now, not empty, but alive again, pulsing with purpose. Every wall, every piece of furniture carried his memory, but none of it owned her anymore. Whatever Lucas and Bianca planned next, she would meet it head on. Arthur had built her a fortress. Now she was learning to live inside it without fear. She closed her eyes and listened to the sea outside, endless, patient, unstoppable. The following morning arrived bright and deceptively calm. Wellington shimmered under a pale sun, the sea glinting like glass. Eleanor dressed with quiet precision, her mind already working. Lucas's anger had crossed a line. She could no longer hope reason would bring him back, only consequences would. By mid-morning, she was sitting in her lawyer's office. James Patel looked up from the stack of documents she had brought. "You've decided to proceed?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Lucas has attempted to access the company's accounts twice. I want formal restrictions." James nodded. "I'll file an injunction today. It will block any attempt to use the Hart Coastal Builders' name or funds without your written consent." Eleanor exhaled slowly. "Good. I want this done before he finds another way in." James studied her face. "I've seen families torn apart by money. Are you sure you want to take this route?" "I didn't choose this," Eleanor said. "I'm finishing what they started." When she left the office, the wind had picked up, rolling the scent of salt through the streets. She didn't head home. Instead, she drove straight to the construction yard. Diego met her at the gate. "Morning, Mrs. Hart," he said, wiping his hands. "Everything all right?" "Not yet," she replied, "but it will be soon." Inside the small office, she laid the legal forms on the desk. "These make it official. Lucas has no authority here." Diego nodded, relief flashing across his tired face. "Thank you. He's been calling suppliers again. I kept blocking him, but I didn't know how long I could hold him off." "You did the right thing," she said. "Now you'll have paperwork to back you up." They reviewed project files for nearly an hour. The company was thriving, contracts lined up through next spring, profit steady. Arthur's system was still working flawlessly. Before she left, Diego said quietly, "Mr. Arthur always said you were stronger than you knew. Guess he was right." Eleanor smiled faintly. He always was. Driving home, she felt the tension lift slightly. For the first time, she was taking control not out of necessity, but choice. The trust, the company, even her future, all of it now rested in her hands. When she pulled into her driveway, Bianca's car was parked outside. Eleanor's pulse tightened. She stepped out, closing her door deliberately. Bianca stood by the porch, arms crossed, expression sharp. "You can't keep avoiding us," Bianca said. "Lucas is devastated. He says you're threatening to ruin him." "Lucas ruined himself," Eleanor replied calmly. "Arthur gave him every chance to be responsible." Bianca's tone turned brittle. "You think you're the victim, but you're not. That house was supposed to stay in the family." "It will," Eleanor said evenly. "With me. I am the family." Bianca took a step closer. "You're making a mistake. Lucas won't back down. He's angry enough to fight you in court." "Then he'll lose," Eleanor said simply. "The documents are airtight." Bianca's eyes flared. "You're cold, Eleanor. You always hid behind that polite smile. But this is cruel." Eleanor held her gaze. "You call it cruel because it's the first time you've heard no." Bianca blinked, stunned into silence. "I have nothing left to prove to either of you," Eleanor continued. "I spent years making myself small so you could feel big. That ends now." Bianca's voice trembled with anger. "You'll regret this." "No," Eleanor said. "You will. I built this life with Arthur. You only borrowed from it." Bianca opened her mouth but said nothing. She turned sharply, heels striking the pavement, and drove away without another word. Eleanor watched the car disappear, then went inside. The house felt quiet, steady, like it was finally breathing again. She poured herself tea and sat by the window, the wind carrying the faint crash of waves from the shore. Her phone buzzed, a message from James Patel. "The injunction is filed, effective immediately." Eleanor smiled, a calm, satisfied smile. Arthur's protection was now law. As evening fell, she walked through the house, touching the door frames, the worn banister, the kitchen counter where Arthur used to read the paper. Everything he'd built was still standing, still hers. In the reflection of the window, she caught her own eyes, steady, sure. She whispered, "You were right, Arthur. I'm stronger than I thought." Outside, the sea shimmered under the fading sun. Waves rose and broke against the cliffs, powerful and rhythmic, echoing her heartbeat. Whatever came next, lawsuits, anger, storms, she was ready. The injunction worked faster than Eleanor expected. Within 2 days, Lucas's calls stopped. The suppliers no longer entertained his requests, and the company's accounts were sealed under her authority. Still, she knew silence didn't mean surrender. Lucas and Bianca were regrouping, not retreating. On the third morning, her lawyer called. "Mrs. Hart," James Patel said, "your son's attorney has reached out. They're threatening to contest the trust. He's claiming undue influence." Eleanor's jaw tightened. Meaning they think Arthur wasn't in his right mind? Exactly. It's a standard tactic when heirs don't like how assets are distributed. She took a slow breath. Arthur planned for this, didn't he? James smiled faintly through the phone. He did. Every transfer, every signature is notarized. Your position is solid, but they'll still try to scare you. They can try, she said. Just make sure we're ready. After hanging up, Eleanor stared out the window. The sea was calm, deceptively peaceful. She thought of Arthur, his steady patience when others lost control. He would tell her to stay calm, to hold the line. So she would. By afternoon, Bianca arrived unannounced. The sound of tires on gravel made Eleanor's pulse tighten. When she opened the door, Bianca was standing there in a beige coat, her expression icy. "Eleanor," she said evenly, "I came to give you one more chance to fix this before lawyers waste everyone's time." Eleanor didn't invite her in. "There's nothing to fix." Bianca's smile was brittle. "Lucas is struggling. He's your son. You can't just cut him out of everything." "I didn't cut him out," Eleanor said. "He cut himself out when he lied, borrowed, and betrayed. The trust doesn't exclude him. It protects me." Bianca stepped closer. "You think this paper shield will keep you safe? Courts can be unpredictable." "I'm not afraid of courts," Eleanor said quietly. "You should be. Fraud leaves a trail and your fingerprints are all over it." Bianca flinched, then recovered with a tight laugh. "You're bluffing." Eleanor opened the door wider, gesturing toward the driveway. "You can test that theory in front of a judge, but if you ever step foot on my property again without permission, I'll call the police." Bianca hesitated, eyes narrowing. "You're going to regret turning this into war." Eleanor's voice stayed calm. "It's only war to those who attack first." Bianca spun on her heel and stormed back to her car. Tires screeched against the wet pavement, leaving the air thick with the smell of burned rubber and frustration. When the sound faded, Eleanor shut the door and leaned against it for a moment. Her hands were steady. She wasn't afraid anymore. That evening, she sat in Arthur's old study, surrounded by the faint smell of cedar and ink. She opened one of his ledgers and found a note written in his careful hand. "If you're reading this, you're stronger than you think. Remember, protection isn't about walls, it's about wisdom." She smiled through tears. "You knew they'd come after me," she whispered. The phone buzzed again. James Patel. "I just received an update," he said. "Bianca's lawyer is backing down. The documentation you provided is airtight. They'll lose if they push it." Eleanor closed the ledger, then let them see that for themselves. After the call, she turned on the radio. Soft jazz filled the room, warm and steady. For the first time in months, she felt her breath ease. The house no longer carried grief, it carried resilience. Later that night, Diego called from the construction yard. "Mrs. Hart just wanted you to know we landed a new contract. The biggest one yet. The team's celebrating. Thought you'd want to hear." Eleanor smiled. Arthur would be proud. "So are we," Diego said. "You've handled all this better than anyone could." After the call, Eleanor stepped onto the porch. The moonlight silvered the sea, calm and endless. She drew her shawl tighter, feeling the cool wind on her face. Everything was finally settling into balance. The trust was safe. The company was thriving. And her son, well, he would have to live with the consequences of his choices. For the first time, Eleanor didn't feel like she was surviving Arthur's absence. She was continuing his work, carrying it forward in her own name. As she looked out toward the dark horizon, the waves broke against the rocks with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat, steady, patient, unstoppable. She whispered, "We won, Arthur." Quietly, just the way you liked. The calm lasted less than a month. One gray morning, a thick envelope appeared at Eleanor's door, heavy, official, stamped with her son's name. Lucas had done it. He was contesting the Hart family trust, claiming Arthur had been manipulated before his death. Eleanor stood at the counter, reading the first page. Each sentence stung with accusation. Undue influence, coercion, mental decline. It was Bianca's language, not Lucas's. Her daughter-in-law had always known how to twist words until they cut. She called her lawyer immediately. "James," it started. "I suspected it might," James Patel replied, his tone calm but firm. "They filed a petition to dissolve the trust. It's weak, but formal. I'll prepare the response today." "Good," Eleanor said. "They won't win, but I want this over quickly." James hesitated. "They're counting on the emotional toll, not the legal one. Don't let them see it shake you." "I won't," she said, hanging up. That night, she sat by the fire and read the petition again. Each paragraph turned Arthur's love into lies. They called her manipulative, claimed she'd forced him to isolate from his family. She almost smiled. Arthur, who planned every decision down to the last decimal, coerced? Never. By morning, her resolve hardened. She drove to the construction yard to speak with Diego. The smell of sawdust and the clang of tools grounded her. When he saw her car, he jogged over, worry etched across his face. "I heard, Mrs. Hart. Lucas really went through with it?" "Yes," she said. "He thinks he can undo Arthur's work." Diego shook his head. Arthur was too smart for that. Every contract's documented, every transfer signed. You're safe. "I know," she said softly, "but it still hurts." They walked through the yard together. The men greeted her with nods and smiles. Arthur's name was still painted proudly on the trucks, the blue lettering slightly faded. "He built all this for us," she murmured. "And you're keeping it alive," Diego said. "That's what matters." Later that afternoon, reporters gathered outside her gate, shouting questions. Someone, surely Bianca, had leaked the story. Eleanor ignored them, her spine straight, her silence unshakable. By evening, James called again. "We have a hearing date. The judge is thorough but fair. I'll submit the trust records and Arthur's medical reports. They'll see how clear-minded he was." Eleanor smiled faintly. Arthur would appreciate that kind of order. He'd probably try to rewrite the court schedule, James joked. That night, Eleanor went to the attic and found the old cedar chest Arthur used to store documents. Inside were his journals, 5 thick ledgers filled with his handwriting. Each entry detailed business decisions, meeting notes, even his reasons for creating the trust. For Ellie, one line read, "So she'll never be at anyone's mercy." Tears pricked her eyes. "You thought of everything," she whispered. At the hearing, the courtroom smelled of wood polish and tension. Bianca arrived in her usual perfection, tailored beige suit, cold smile. Lucas followed behind her, pale and uneasy. Eleanor sat across from them, dignified in dark blue. James presented the evidence methodically. Notarized documents, dated transfers, medical reports proving Arthur's mental clarity. Each page dismantled Bianca's case piece by piece. Bianca's lawyer stammered through objections, but the judge's expression grew colder with each attempt. Finally, Eleanor stood to speak. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady, "my husband created this trust not out of fear, but love. He wanted me protected. What they're challenging isn't money, it's his integrity." The judge nodded once. "Thank you, Mrs. Hart." When the ruling came an hour later, it was decisive. The trust was upheld. The petition was dismissed with prejudice. Bianca's composure shattered. She stormed out, cameras flashing. Lucas lingered near the door, guilt heavy in his posture. "Mom," he said quietly, "I didn't think it would go this far." Eleanor looked at him evenly. "It went as far as you let it." He swallowed. "I just wanted what was fair." "What's fair," she said, "is honoring what your father built, not destroying it." She turned and walked past him, out into the crisp Wellington air. The harbor wind smelled of rain and salt, wild and clean. Arthur's fortress had held. Every document, every signature, every ounce of foresight had done exactly what he intended, shielding her from betrayal. Back home, she set the ruling beside Arthur's journals. The late light filled the room, warm and golden. Outside, the tide rolled against the cliffs, rhythmic and unyielding. Eleanor whispered, "You were right, Arthur. Love built stronger walls than greed ever could." The day after the court ruling, the phone rang non-stop. Friends, neighbors, even old colleagues called to congratulate Eleanor. The news had spread quickly. Widow defeats son in inheritance lawsuit. Some called it justice. Others called it scandal. Eleanor called it peace. She made tea and sat by the window overlooking the sea. The storm that had followed her since Arthur's death was finally quiet. Yet peace, she knew, didn't mean the story was over. By afternoon, a black sedan pulled into her driveway. James Patel stepped out carrying a folder. "Thought I'd deliver this in person," he said. "The final documentation. Case closed." Eleanor smiled. "I can't thank you enough, James. Arthur would have liked you. He probably would have argued with me about clause placement," James said, grinning. Then his tone softened. "You did something rare, Eleanor. Most people fold under that kind of pressure." "I've spent a lifetime being underestimated," she replied. "It's oddly useful." They went through the paperwork together. The trust remained intact. The company's ownership undisputed. Bianca and Lucas had signed agreements preventing any future claims. James flipped to the last page. "This makes it official. You're free." Eleanor exhaled. Free. That's a word I haven't used in a while. After he left, she wandered through the house, touching the familiar edges of her life. The dining table, the piano Arthur used to play, the old photographs along the hallway. For the first time, she could look at them without pain. The next morning, Diego called from the construction yard. "Good news, Mrs. Hart. We just landed another contract, one of the biggest we've ever had. Seems our reputation's stronger than ever." "That's wonderful, Diego," she said. "Keep the team steady. Arthur would be proud." "He already is," Diego said quietly. When she hung up, Eleanor opened her laptop and began writing a letter, not to Lucas or Bianca, but to the company's employees. "Hart Coastal Builders," she typed, "will continue exactly as Arthur intended. Honest work, fair pay, loyalty repaid with loyalty. Our strength is in what we build, not what we take." She sent the letter, then leaned back, watching the cursor blink like a heartbeat. In the evening, the doorbell rang. For a moment, she thought it might be Lucas, but when she opened the door, a young woman stood there, nervous, holding a small envelope. "Mrs. Hart? I'm Emily Alvarez, Diego's daughter. My father said I should bring this to you." Inside the envelope was a photo of Arthur and Diego taken years ago, both laughing at the construction site. On the back, Diego had written, "He built more than houses. He built people." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Thank you, Emily," she whispered. Later that night, as the wind picked up outside, Eleanor brewed herself a final cup of tea and sat by the window. The moonlight danced across the waves. She thought of Arthur, his quiet confidence, his endless patience. "You protected me, love," she murmured. "Now I know how to protect myself." Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry." Lucas. Eleanor stared at the screen for a long moment, then placed the phone face down. Forgiveness would come when it was earned. The next morning, she packed a small bag and drove to the coast. The drive to Akaroa took 3 hours, winding through green hills and ocean cliffs. Arthur had always loved this place. They'd planned to retire there one day. At the edge of the beach, she stopped. The air smelled of salt and sunlight. She walked to the water, her shoes sinking into wet sand. The tide lapped at her feet, gentle, constant. She took a deep breath, pulled a folded note from her pocket, and tossed it into the sea. It wasn't a letter to Lucas or Bianca, but to Arthur. It read, "You kept your promise. I've kept mine. I'm not afraid anymore." The paper floated for a moment before dissolving into the waves. As she stood there, the sun broke through the clouds, lighting the water like glass. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was standing in his shadow. She was standing beside his memory, strong, steady, alive. When she turned back toward her car, the wind carried her whispered words out to sea. "Thank you, Arthur, for teaching me how to build and how to stay standing when the world tried to take it all apart." The tide rolled in again, soft and sure, as if answering her. The morning after her trip to Akaroa, Eleanor woke to sunlight spilling across her bedroom floor. The house felt different, lighter, as if it had finally exhaled after months of holding its breath. She brewed her coffee and stood at the window, watching the sea glitter. For the first time since Arthur's passing, she felt not just calm, but alive. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Diego. "The new contract's confirmed. We're expanding the crew. Thought you'd want to know." Eleanor smiled and texted back, "Arthur would be proud. So am I." Later that morning, she met James Patel at the cafe near the harbor. He waved as she entered, holding 2 cups of tea. "You're looking well," he said. "I am," she admitted. "Free, even." He smiled. "Not everyone finds peace after a legal war." "Peace wasn't given," she said. "It was earned." James handed her an envelope. "The final financial statement for the trust. It's performing beautifully. You'll never need to worry about stability again." Eleanor didn't look inside. "I'm not worried. For the first time, I trust myself more than any number." He nodded, understanding. "What's next for you then? You've won every battle worth fighting." Eleanor looked out the window toward the harbor. "Now I start building something new." That afternoon, she drove to the community center, a modest brick building that had hosted countless neighborhood meetings over the years. Inside, she found Linda Morrison, Margaret's daughter and a nurse, who'd once called to invite her to speak at a support group. "Mrs. Hart," Linda exclaimed, hurrying over. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I needed time," Eleanor said, "but I think I'm ready." Linda smiled. "We'd love to have you." The group's called Second Chapters, women rebuilding after loss, betrayal, or big life changes. They could use your story. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. "I'll tell it. But not as a tragedy." "That's the spirit," Linda said. A week later, Eleanor stood before a small audience of women seated in folding chairs. The room smelled faintly of tea and rain. She wasn't nervous. She spoke slowly, clearly. her voice carrying the calm of someone who had already walked through fire. "My husband Arthur believed in building things that last," she began. "He built homes, a company, and a life with me. When he passed, I discovered that what he truly built was strength. Mine." The women listened closely, eyes shining. "I lost almost everything I thought defined me," she continued. "But what I learned is this: strength isn't loud. It's quiet. It's sitting at a table with people who doubt you and refusing to doubt yourself." When she finished, there was a long silence, then soft applause. A woman in the back stood and said, "Thank you. I thought I was the only one." Eleanor smiled gently. None of us are ever the only one. After the meeting, several women came to speak with her, some in tears, some simply grateful. Eleanor felt something stir in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years: purpose. That evening, she sat on her porch overlooking the ocean. The sunset painted the sky in streaks of gold and violet. The waves rolled in their eternal rhythm, patient and strong. She thought of Arthur again, not as the man she lost, but as the one who had taught her to stand tall. He'd built her a fortress, but she had learned to open its gates. Her phone buzzed, a message from Lucas. "Mom, I started repaying what I owe the business. Diego said the first transfer went through. I'm trying." Eleanor read the words twice. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she typed a short reply. "Good. Keep trying." It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. The wind rose, carrying the scent of salt through the air. Eleanor wrapped her shawl tighter and looked toward the horizon. The world was wide again. Tomorrow, she would return to Akaroa to finalize the purchase of a small seaside cottage Arthur had once loved, not as a retreat, but as a new chapter. She smiled, whispering into the dusk, "You see, Arthur? You built the foundation. I'm building the rest." The waves answered steady and sure, and she realized that the life she'd thought ended with her husband had only just begun. A week later, Eleanor drove down the coast again, the road winding between cliffs and sea. The sun shimmered weakly through a veil of mist, turning the waves silver. Arthur had loved this drive. He used to hum old jazz songs and point out every seabird along the way. Now the road belonged to her, quiet and free. By midday, she reached Akaroa, a sleepy seaside town nestled between green hills and bright blue water. Waiting at the cottage was Linda Morrison, holding a folder and smiling warmly. "Mrs. Hart," Linda said, "it's official. The sale's complete. Welcome home." Eleanor took the keys, her fingers trembling slightly. "Thank you, Linda." She stepped through the front door. The cottage smelled faintly of pine and salt, sunlight spilling through wide windows. It was small, 2 bedrooms, white walls, simple furniture, but the air felt peaceful. She touched the wooden mantel and exhaled softly. "You'd have loved it here, Arthur," she whispered. Linda lingered in the doorway. "We'll be holding another Second Chapters meeting next week. The women would love for you to join us again." Eleanor nodded. "I'll be there. Maybe this time I'll listen more than I talk." Linda grinned. Sometimes that's the best gift you can give. When she left, Eleanor made tea and sat by the window, watching the waves fold against the rocks. The rhythm soothed her. This little house wasn't just a place to live. It was proof that life could be rebuilt on gentler ground. Later that day, she called Diego. "I won't be in Wellington for a while," she said. "You're in charge of operations. Just keep things the way Arthur taught you." "I will," Diego said. "He'd be proud of how far you've come." "So am I," she replied. That evening, she took a walk along the beach. The air was cool, the water calm. The wind tugged at her hair as if urging her to keep moving forward. She smiled. "I am, Arthur," she said softly. "I really am." The next morning, she strolled into the village. The little cafe near the pier buzzed with quiet chatter. The owner, a man in his 60s with kind eyes, greeted her cheerfully. "You must be the new lady in the white cottage," he said. "Arthur used to come here years ago, always ordered scones, tipped too much, and asked about the tides." Eleanor laughed gently. "That sounds exactly like him." She stayed for coffee and listened to the locals talk about fishing, weather, and small joys. It felt comforting. Simple lives lived without pretense. For the first time, she didn't feel like a widow protecting her past. She felt like a woman writing her next chapter. That afternoon, she unpacked the few boxes she had brought. Most were filled with books, one with family photos. She placed a picture of her and Arthur on the mantel, their wedding day, both laughing into the wind. Next to it, she set a seashell they'd once found during a long, forgotten trip to the coast. When she opened her laptop, she saw an email from Lucas. "I've made another payment to the business. I've started volunteering with a housing project. Trying to be better. I hope you're okay." Eleanor read it twice. The words carried effort, maybe even humility. She typed a short reply. "I am, Lucas. Keep going." Afterward, she went outside with a cup of tea. The sun was sinking behind the hills, bathing the sea in gold. The waves moved with steady grace, their rhythm neither rushing nor retreating, just being. She thought of everything she'd endured, the grief, the betrayal, the courtroom, the endless ache of absence. Yet all of it had brought her here, to this quiet place where the air smelled of salt and forgiveness. She wrapped her shawl tighter and watched the horizon darken. The peace she felt wasn't fragile anymore. It was rooted, built from everything she'd learned to survive. Inside, the old clock she'd brought from Wellington chimed 6 times, its sound warm and familiar. Eleanor smiled. "Still keeping time," she said, as though speaking to Arthur himself. Later, as the stars appeared, she stood by the open window and whispered into the wind, "You'd like it here. It's honest. It's home." The sea responded with a soft rush against the rocks. She took it as an answer, a quiet promise that love, when built right, never truly ends. Eleanor closed the curtains, her heart steady and whole. Tomorrow she would visit the market, plant flowers by the porch, and keep building the life she'd finally earned. Life in Akaroa soon settled into an easy rhythm. Mornings began with the scent of sea air drifting through the open windows, followed by coffee at Samuel's Cafe, where the regulars greeted Eleanor as if she had always belonged. Afternoons were quiet, books, walks along the cliffs, or tending to the small garden she'd planted behind the cottage. Evenings brought the low hum of waves and the comfort of solitude that no longer felt lonely. One Tuesday, Linda called. "Eleanor, we're hosting another Second Chapters meeting tomorrow. Would you like to speak again?" Eleanor hesitated. "I don't know if I have anything new to say." Linda laughed. "Then just listen. Sometimes that's enough." The next day, Eleanor walked to the community hall. The room was fuller than before, women of every age, their faces carrying different stories, but the same quiet strength. Linda greeted her warmly. "I'm glad you came." When the meeting began, the women took turns sharing. One spoke about rebuilding her life after her husband's passing. Another had just left a long, unhappy marriage. Their voices trembled at times, but there was courage beneath the cracks. When Linda finally turned to Eleanor, she said gently, "Would you like to share something?" Eleanor rose slowly. "For many years, I thought peace meant keeping everyone else comfortable," she said softly. "I learned that peace isn't about surrendering. It's about reclaiming what's yours and guarding it without shame." The room was still. "I spent my life building walls strong enough to survive storms," she continued, "but only recently did I learn how to open a door and let new light in." When she sat down, several women reached out to touch her hand. Linda whispered, "You have no idea how much they needed to hear that." After the meeting, a young woman named Claire approached her. "Mrs. Hart, I'm starting over too," she said, eyes glistening. "Your words make me think I can actually do it." Eleanor smiled. "You already are. You showed up." As she walked home, the evening air smelled of salt and damp earth. The sky was streaked pink and gold. She thought of Arthur and the long years they'd shared, the laughter, the work, even the fights that had shaped them both. The memory no longer stung. It steadied her. Back at the cottage, she found an email waiting from Lucas. "Mom, I made the final payment to the business. I know it doesn't erase what happened, but I'm trying. Could we meet someday?" Eleanor read it twice, then closed her laptop. Her heart didn't ache the way it once had. It felt ready. That night, she pulled one of Arthur's old journals from the shelf. Between pages of figures and notes was a line written in his neat hand. "The hardest part of building is knowing when to forgive the cracks." She smiled sadly. "You always knew," she whispered. The next morning, she wrote a short reply to Lucas. "When you're ready to talk, not about money, but about truth, you can come to Akaroa. No excuses." She mailed it that afternoon before doubt could stop her. Days passed. Eleanor returned to her quiet rhythm, helping Linda organize another meeting, reading by the window and tending to her garden. The lavender she planted bloomed early, filling the air with fragrance. One afternoon, Linda stopped by with a pie and a grin. "The community board wants you to host a monthly workshop for the women's group. You'd be perfect." Eleanor laughed. "I'm no teacher." Linda shrugged. "You don't have to be. You just have to be you." Eleanor thought for a moment. "All right," she said finally. "If my story helps someone else stand taller, I'll share it." That evening, she walked down to the beach. The tide was low, the sand cool beneath her shoes. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the village, mixing with the cry of gulls. She picked up a smooth stone from the shore, rolling it between her fingers. "This is what peace feels like," she murmured. "Solid, quiet, earned." She placed the stone on a piece of driftwood near the water's edge, a small marker of everything she had rebuilt. The wind tugged gently at her hair as the sun dipped low over the sea. Eleanor looked out across the waves and smiled. "You'd be proud, Arthur," she whispered. "You built the foundation, but I built the life." As twilight deepened, she turned toward home. The porch light glowed softly in the distance, a beacon of her own making. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like someone who had survived loss. She felt like someone who had arrived. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived bearing Lucas's handwriting. Eleanor found it in her mailbox just after dawn, the paper slightly crumpled as if he'd rewritten it many times before sending it. She carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it for a long moment before opening it. "Mom," it began, "I received your note. I don't know what to say except thank you for giving me the chance to try. I'm coming to Akaroa this weekend if you'll have me. I just want to talk, not about money, not about the past, about us." Eleanor folded the letter carefully and placed it on the counter. Her hands didn't tremble. She'd been waiting for this, not for an apology, but for honesty. That Friday afternoon, the sound of tires on gravel broke the quiet outside the cottage. She stepped onto the porch as Lucas's car pulled in. He got out slowly, wearing the same nervous expression she remembered from his boyhood, the one he used to have when confessing to some small mischief. "Mom," he said softly. "Lucas," she replied, her tone even. "Come in." Inside, the cottage smelled of coffee and salt. He looked around as if trying to measure the life she'd built without him. "It's beautiful here," he said finally. "It's peaceful," she corrected. He nodded, sitting at the table. "I've thought a lot about what happened. About Dad. About what I did. Eleanor poured 2 cups of tea, placing one in front of him. Thinking is a start. He took a breath. I was angry. I thought you were trying to erase me from everything he built. And now, I see that you were just protecting what was already yours. Eleanor studied his face, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the tiredness that hadn't been there before. Arthur loved you, she said quietly. He wanted you to grow up strong, not entitled. I know, Lucas said. I thought love meant getting what I wanted, but now I realize it meant being given what I needed, even when I didn't like it. They sat in silence, the sound of waves filling the room. Finally, he said, Bianca left. Eleanor didn't flinch. I'm sorry, though I can't say I'm surprised. She wanted the fight more than the marriage, he said with a weary smile. Turns out she was never after peace, just control. Eleanor nodded slowly. You can start over now. That's what your father always believed in, new foundations. Lucas looked down at his tea. Do you think I can fix what I broke? You can't fix it, she said softly, but you can build something better. His eyes glistened. You sound like Dad. He'd like that, she replied. For the first time in years, they laughed, a small, genuine sound that filled the quiet cottage. Later, they walked along the beach, the tide low and the wind gentle. Lucas stopped to watch the waves. I thought winning would make me happy, he said, but losing everything made me understand who I am. Eleanor looked at him, her heart both heavy and light. Sometimes we have to lose what doesn't matter to see what does. He nodded. You forgive me? She hesitated. Forgiveness isn't a door that opens all at once, Lucas. It's something I walk through a little each day. Today, I've taken another step. He smiled faintly. That's more than I deserve. They stood in silence for a long time, watching gulls swoop low across the water. The horizon glowed gold as the sun dipped toward the sea. Back at the cottage, Lucas paused at the door. Thank you for letting me come. Thank you for coming, Eleanor said. You didn't have to. He looked around the small living room, the framed photo of Arthur, the stack of books by the window, the air of quiet dignity that filled every corner. Dad would be proud, he said. Eleanor's throat tightened. Yes, I think he would. After he left, she stood on the porch watching the car disappear down the road. The wind carried the faint echo of the ocean, steady and sure. For the first time since Arthur's death, her heart felt unburdened, not because everything was fixed, but because it no longer needed to be. Inside, the clock ticked softly. She poured herself another cup of tea and sat by the window, the last light fading beyond the sea. Life wasn't about rebuilding what she had lost anymore. It was about living what remained. She whispered into the quiet, He's learning, Arthur. So am I. Outside, the waves rolled on, patient and eternal, just like love that endures long after words are gone. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of the seaside cottage, painting soft gold across the wooden floor. Eleanor stirred her tea, watching the steam curl like ocean mist. 6 months had passed since she'd moved to Akaroa, and her life now ran on quiet rituals, walks along the cliffs, tending her lavender, writing notes for her women's group. Each day felt full but never rushed. That morning she checked her email. A message from Lucas waited at the top. Mom, I'll be in Akaroa this weekend. I'd like to visit if you're ready. Eleanor smiled faintly. She had known this day would come. She typed only 2 words in reply. Come, son. Saturday arrived clear and calm. She baked scones the way Arthur used to, slightly uneven, brushed with honey. When Lucas's car appeared on the gravel drive, she felt her heartbeat quicken, but not with fear. He stepped out, taller somehow, calmer. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Lucas," she replied softly. "Tea's ready." They sat on the porch, the sea glimmering beyond the hills. For a while, neither spoke. Then Lucas said, "I didn't expect you to agree so easily." "I stopped living in fear a long time ago," Eleanor said. "You can't build peace by keeping doors closed forever." He looked down, twisting his cup in his hands. "I've been working hard, paid every cent I owed. I even started helping with the housing charity. It feels good, doing something real." Eleanor smiled gently. "Arthur always said you'd find your way when you stopped trying to skip the hard parts." Lucas's eyes softened. "I think I finally understand him now. And you." They talked for hours about the company, his new job, and the past that had nearly broken them. At one point, he reached across the table, hesitating before touching her hand. "Mom, I can't undo what I did, but I can try to be better." Eleanor squeezed his fingers lightly. "That's all I ever wanted." When he left that afternoon, he promised to visit again soon. As his car disappeared down the road, Eleanor felt the ache of goodbye. But it wasn't sorrow this time. It was healing. That evening, she hosted her first workshop for second chapters. The community hall buzzed with soft conversation and laughter. Linda introduced her. "Our guest tonight doesn't just tell stories, she lives proof that rebuilding is possible." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice steady. "When my husband died, I thought I'd lost everything. Then my son betrayed me, and I thought I'd lost even more. But what I really lost were illusions. That love means control, that peace means silence. I learned that forgiveness doesn't erase pain, it transforms it." The women listened intently, some wiped tears, others nodded in understanding. "I'm not here to teach you how to be strong," she continued. "You already are. I'm here to remind you that strength can be quiet. It can be choosing to live kindly, even when the world hasn't been kind to you." When the meeting ended, several women hugged her. One whispered, "You gave me hope?" Eleanor smiled. "That's all any of us can give." The next morning, she drove to the cliffs above the harbor carrying a small box. Inside were Arthur's watch, a few photos, and the wedding ring she'd worn for 32 years. She walked to the edge, the wind tangling her hair. "Arthur," she said softly, "you kept your promise. You made sure I'd never be helpless. Now I'm keeping mine, to live fully, not fearfully." She opened the box and scattered its contents into the sea. The watch caught the light once before sinking beneath the waves. Eleanor stood there for a long time, listening to the ocean's endless rhythm. The wind brushed her cheeks like a hand she still knew by heart. As she turned back toward the path, she felt lighter, as if something long locked inside her had finally loosened. The past no longer clung to her. It simply accompanied her, gentle and quiet. Back at the cottage, she sat on the porch with her tea and opened her notebook. She began writing the first lines of her new talk for the group. "Grief doesn't end, it ripens. Love doesn't fade, it changes shape." When she finished, she looked out over the sea. The waves glimmered beneath the afternoon sun, endless and alive. Eleanor raised her cup slightly. "Here's to you, Arthur, to every woman who learns she can stand again." The tide rolled in, steady and sure, as if applauding her. She smiled, peaceful and proud. Her story wasn't ending. It was beginning again. "Tell me," she whispered to the horizon, "what would you have done if you were me?" And for those who listened to her story now, she asked the same question. What would you do if you had to rebuild your life from the ground up?